Welcome to the study of John's Gospel. I am Father Turro. I am stationed at Seton Hall Seminary in New Jersey. I do teach at in Connecticut at the Cromwell Seminary, Holy Apostles. And the thing that I most of all would like to get across is that I am enthusiastic about the study of Scripture, and I hope that that is contagious, that you will catch fire as a result of what we have to consider here. John's Gospel, of course, is quite an assignment. It's a very profound and vast study, and of course there's no thought of, within the compass of a single course, of doing full justice to it. We're going to have to just do bits and pieces of it, and hope all the while that enough of the character, the essence of the gospel comes through from the limited treatment that we'll be able to afford to give it. The Gospels, or rather let me say the New Testament, comes into existence, as it seems, in answer to the needs of the people back at the time when it began to be written. At first, the Christians were very much taken by the fact of the resurrection. They were bedazzled by it. And when you stop to think about it, why shouldn't they have been? Here, it was a question of having known this person, seen him dead, limp on the cross, then subsequently seeing him alive again, quite alive. This was not a phantasm, not a ghost, nothing insubstantial. It was really the same person who had died on the cross, now alive again. Well, you can understand how this would become a kind of an obsession for these people. This is all they could think about, it's all they could talk about back in those early years of Christianity. Well, as the New Testament comes into existence, it sort of answers the need of these people. It corresponds to their enthusiasms. So if at the beginning they are so taken with the resurrection, you find that the first part of the New Testament deals precisely with that, with the resurrection. And the first part of the New Testament are the epistles. This comes as a surprise to many, because we're usually in the habit of working our way through the New Testament, starting with Matthew, going on to Mark, Luke, and John, and eventually getting to the epistles. But just the reverse in chronology. The epistles were first produced, and then only subsequently the Gospels. The earliest bit of New Testament material we have dates from the year 51 A.D. The Gospels don't come into existence until a later decade. But the thing that I want to put across now is that these epistles concentrate on that fact that loomed so large in the consciousness of the early Christians, the fact of the resurrection. And so the epistles speak to us not only about the fact, but about the implications, the consequences of that fact. And the people were happy enough to find material that discussed all these tangents, these aspects of the resurrection. But with the passage of time, an interesting thing happens, but quite understandable again. The people are still very much taken by the fact that Jesus has risen from the dead and is alive again. But now they're consumed with the desire to grasp more and more of the details of the story of Jesus. Where was it that Jesus cured Peter's mother-in-law? Well, that was in Capernaum at Peter's house. Who was it that came and emptied a small box of perfume over Jesus? Oh, that was Mary. These little incidentals, you might almost call them, incidental features, become fascinating for the people. And so the Gospels were conceived of for, among other reasons, to satisfy, you might say, the people of those times' curiosity, their desire to know more and more, even small, seemingly insignificant facets of the story of Christ. So the Gospels come into existence with that thrust. Now, of all the Gospels, the one that we have in hand, John's Gospel, is arguably the most beloved, the Gospel that Christians respond to more readily. People say that that's because they find it to be they find it to be so spiritual. All the Gospels have a spiritual dimension to them, but this perhaps has more. And I say that for this reason. It isn't satisfied. The writer of this Gospel was not satisfied just to indicate the significance of a particular thing that happens in the story of Jesus. It underscores that significance more than it would seem the other Gospels do. But for whatever reason, it is perhaps the best known and the most loved of all the Gospels. It certainly is in its construction, and it's the simplest, and yet in some respects the most profound book of the New Testament. It mixes history and interpretation, biography and theology. All are blended together to project on our consciousness, on the consciousness of the reader, the Jesus of history in the light of Christian experience. I might say this, that it's perhaps for that reason eminently useful and enriching. Useful, by that I mean to suggest that it can be a very great help to someone who is going to be teaching Christian doctrine, caught up in the catechetical program of some parish or other. You'll find this Gospel to be a mine of information, but enriching because just a quiet reading of it does so much for the individual person, for the individual soul. So it is an outstanding Gospel. A good long while ago, the Christian community worked out symbols for the various Gospels. So, for instance, the lion is the symbol for Mark's Gospel. The eagle is a symbol for John's Gospel. For a clear enough reason, the eagle soars. And when one soars above a landscape, one gets a very good, comprehensive impression, view of that whole landscape. You know, it's much like someone has lived on the island of Manhattan one's whole life, but then later on in life, for the first time, flies over it on a flight to Chicago, and for the first time, that person who's so familiar with this venue now gets an impression of its outline, of its silhouette. Well, you know, if you soar as an eagle soars, that's what you see down below. Well, that would have been one reason why, so surely, the people back centuries ago thought of the eagle as best symbolizing this Gospel, because it gives us that sense of the shape of the phenomenon that is Christ, a sense of the shape of his teaching as well.